on our YouTube channel, so you can catch that live stream and post a comment on there as well. It's Smooth981 on YouTube. All right, let's get into it.
We'll begin with the Nation newspaper this morning. Gbubemi, as you would help us understand and unpack the issues here, what the demands are looking like from the Trade Union Congress. But the headline screams here. TUC, that's the Trade Union Congress, presents 10 demands before President Tinubu.
Okay, good morning, Zibby. Good morning, Mas. First and foremost, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Okay, so the Trade Union Congress, which is one of two major labor congresses in the country, the other being the Nigerian Labour Congress, has issued a statement relating to 10 demands that they have of the President Tinubu. And this statement was released as their New Year statement. A lot of the issues covers, or practically all of the issues cover, a lot of the contemporary issues that we are experiencing as Nigerians. One of the first issue actually that they raised is that the federal government should honor all agreements between labor and the government regarding the payment of the monthly 35,000 naira wage award to public servants in the local government, state and federal services until a new national minimum wage has been implemented. There were talks about the RMA's Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission coming up with a new minimum wage last year in discussions with the federal government, but that has not been fully finalized. So the federal government came up with the, should I call it a palliative payment, a monthly palliative payment of 35,000 naira. So they're just asking the federal government to ensure that they honor that agreement until a national minimum wage has been implemented. Another of their demands is for the federal government to also check inflation. Inflation is currently at approximately about 20.2%, and they've said that the federal government must make sure that they drastically reduce it to the sub-Saharan African regional average of approximately about 9.4%. Another one is for the federal government to ensure that both state and federal governments reduce or totally eliminate their penchants for seeking for loans, because typically those loans aren't always used for developmental purposes and are used, according to them, are used to purchase expensive jeeps for legislators, pamper members of the executive and their spouses, and building unnecessary offices and purchasing mundane and sundry items, including stationaries. So essentially, they're calling on the federal government to ensure that any loan, if at all taken, should be taken for developmental purposes rather than rather than as some sort of funding for non-material items. Another of their concerns is the naira scarcity issue. So they've said that the sale of the naira on the streets should be checked by the CBN as much as possible, and government must make sure that that there's adequate supply of naira notes in the banking system. So this is something that came up sometime towards the end of last year, where people would go to the banks and we wouldn't be able to withdraw a certain amount of money. The CBN had come out to talk about the amount of money that was in circulation, but obviously it appears as though they haven't printed enough money, which is why we're experiencing this cash shortage again. If we recall, this was somewhat how we were at the beginning of last year as well, towards the election period, when the naira notes redesign came into force, and the 500 and 1,000 naira notes were withdrawn until much later when the Supreme Court stipulated that they go back into circulation. Also, they focused on the high cost of petrol. Currently petrol trading approximately between 600 615 and much higher outside Lagos. They've also said that the federal government should make sure that they try to drastically reduce the cost of petrol, especially considering that they have said that the local refineries and some of the local refineries are now getting set to refine crude oil. Security, they've talked about security as well, focusing on the massacre in Plateau State. They've said that the federal government, as much as possible, working with the state government to ensure community policing is prioritized. They've also asked the federal government to engage in dialogue with aggrieved groups representing nationalities who feel marginalized, shortchanged, or shut out. I'm not sure if that is a pointer towards hip hop. It maybe sounds like that. So basically, anyway, these are, like I had said originally, these are many of the concerns that affect us as Nigerians, and we hope that the federal government will pay attention to these.
Well, I mean, this looks more like a very all-inclusive list. If we're a government, let's assume even the government doesn't have an agenda. If the government goes with this plan, it looks like it might be solving half of the problems already facing the country.
Yeah, okay, so some of these things that appear as problems are actually symptoms. So what I would always say is identify what the root causes are, and the symptoms will go away.
Okay.
So I'm curious about this. So the the TUC has brought out these demands that need to be met. The NLC is consistently bringing out its own demands, and I wonder if the interest is, overall for the Nigerian work and the Nigerian people. Is this a case of every group just trying to get their own attention, get their bit, or are they truly going to work together to actually ensure that those needs are actually met?
Well, it's our expectation that they actually do work together. Unfortunately, both labor organizations have not received a very good reputation, externally. A lot of people do not believe that labor exists for the purpose of fighting for the average Nigerian worker. We're hoping that these change, hopefully with the actions of the executives, and let's just see.
All right. Well, let us know what your thoughts are. The WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. And we're moving on to the next headline, and this comes from Daily Trust. Now, nurses working at the Federal Medical Center, Idiaba in Abeokuta, have protested against an alleged exclusion from the 2023 promotion that was carried out by the institution.
So the nurses have alleged that typically with federal government organizations there would be like a promotional exam, and then the nurses have come out to say that the authorities have said that no nurse passed that promotional exam, and then they have said, okay, if we failed, let us even see the scripts of the exam, which has not been made available to them. I'm not sure if that is a typical practice to provide scripts. But then it's also concerning that all of the nurses, that not a single nurse passed the exam. That may be the case, that may not be the case, but I believe that it calls for investigation. The nurses have cited the fact that they've had to work longer hours because of the shortage of manpower in the hospital, which is quite valid. And based on that, they believe that promotion should be due to them. So, they've spoken out to the federal government, because it's a federal government establishment, to look into their issue as much as possible and see what they can do about what they believe is their merited promotion.
All right, thank you for that, Gbubemi.
Okay, but before we rest that, it would seem across the world right now, it seems protests and all of this is a format to get governments to act. When we just oppose this with the UK, where junior doctors are also holding the sleeves of their employers right now for better pay package. So it seems, well, this jackpot thing, it's not really solving it, because what you're running away from, you'd also meet on the other side. I'd like you to just link that up for us.
Okay, so for those who are jackpotting from here to the West, the UK, the US, for example, they may not necessarily have an issue with the pay, because compared with what they were earning here, it's probably much more significant, but the issue for the foreign health workers is, they're looking at the standard of their pay vis-a-vis the state of the economy, improvements and all of that, and which they believe is not commensurate, so typically at the end of the day, that's why they protest. So for the health sector, for the UK, the NHS, I think it's the largest medical service in the world, and provides, should I say, quote unquote, free medical services to citizens and eligible people. So there are a lot of pressures on the NHS, and we even had a situation where even as doctors or health workers have jackpot from here to the UK, for example, you've had health workers from the UK jackpot to like Australia or to Canada. So really at the end of the day, there's no pleasing anybody.
That takes us to the next item. This is coming from Premium Times and it's education related. And knowing that in the last 48 hours, the focus has been on the educational sector in Nigeria vis-a-vis Nigeria's neighbor and the quality of education. But somewhere along the line, I know that as you help us unpack this headline, you might touch on it a bit for us. So the headline says, we will make education more accessible, federal government assures Nigeria. How so? And would this keep them from seeking it elsewhere across the border, especially from neighbors?
Okay, so this statement was made by the Minister of State for Education, Yusuf Sununu, who made this pledge at the inauguration of the new campus of the National Open University in Surulere. The new campus was donated by the Chief of Staff of the President, the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. And that was one of the things that he, so in this week he's, donated quite a lot of infrastructure. He's donated a hospital, he's donated a hostel accommodation, he's donated this facilities. Now he's donated quite a lot of infrastructure, and so the Minister of State for Education was focusing on the fact that a lot of people are concerned about the rising cost of education, quote and unquote, considering now that a lot of the institutions are now charging for services. So they are not charging for fees, they're charging for associated services, which may make it seem as though education is not necessarily accessible to everyone who aspires to it. So one of the things that they've said is, okay, so even with the establishment of this new campus, so the National Open University exists to serve people who may not traditionally have time, to go to a full-time institution. So it's sort of like a part-time. So whether you're working, or whether you are self-employed, you have the opportunity of accessing education from the National Open University. And so he's made this promise on behalf of the federal government and said that it's in line with the access to education policy of the federal government. And as much as possible, they want to make sure that everybody who aspires to higher education has the potential of receiving that education.
All right, let's go on to WhatsApp. You can send your messages in, by the way, 0809 4440981. Toye from the Lagos metropolis says, I have one word. Federal government response to the long spiel from the NLC. That would be TUC. Noted. The TUC has shown that they are completely powerless. Antelopes instructing lions not to hunt them in the Serengeti is the perfect analogy to describe Labour instructing the federal government. You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Do stay with us. The conversation continues.
And you're listening to the Smooth Breakfast Show. You are an orchestra. Watching you move is like listening to a symphony of body parts directed by a maestro.
Number one, yeah?
When you walk, it is like watching a G clef stroll across an octave accented by a C sharp. When you talk, the cadence of your voice is a tenor saxophone, making love to a cello at perfect pitch. And you are... That's why we keep it here on 98.1. This is Justin EJ, signing out.
98.1.
The best of everything in the morning. And
Okay, Omatseye, bring us in.
weekday mornings, 6.
It's Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1 FM. Gbubemi is still here helping us pick up the papers, get the headlines going. But of course, we also expect you to get your thoughts across how the headlines resonate with you this morning on 0809 4440981. We'd love to read it and see how it's going. So, Gbubemi, let's get into oil matters, and they say whatever touches oil will make us get to sneeze and probably cough and catch cold. So let's go to the Vanguard newspaper. The NNPCL marketers denying fuel price increase to 1,200 naira per litre. For the average Nigerian listening at this time, knowing from experience that most increments they've had over the years would first start as a rumor, then there would be a subtle rebuttal or debunking of it, and then eventually somewhere maybe a month or two down the line it comes up as this is it. But the NNPC issued a statement relating to this and linking this headline to it.
Okay, so it's interesting that you put it that way because yesterday I read someone's tweet and he said, "Oh, this is the pattern that we're used to as Nigerians. When the government wants to introduce something, if it permits the air first and foremost as a rumor, everybody possible comes out to debunk it, and then much later, some form of that rumor will exist." So what he had said was, "Oh, okay, so now we're saying 1 2, but federal government wants to increase it to let's say X." So they just say 1 2 to get you outraged, so that when it comes down to X, you're like, okay, at least that's possible. I don't know how true that is, but the truth of the matter is that the cost of oil, cost of petrol or fuel, has not changed in the last, I think, about 6 months. It has not changed significantly. Let me put it that way. So NNPC stations still sell for about 586, but private stations sell from anything from 600 to maybe about 620, 630. That's in Lagos, and outside Lagos, it's much higher. So the question has been, where is the difference coming from? Also considering the global price of crude oil, so where is that difference from? Now, in this NNPC statement, they have said, let me just quote that verbatim.
Olufemi Shoneye, I guess that's what you're looking for, the spokesperson.
Yes. So NNPC emphasizes that it has not clashed with any party. The publication sought confirmation on the alleged subsidy reduction, to which NNPC responded that subsidy has been entirely removed. But one begins to wonder, okay, so if subsidy has been entirely removed, what is making up the cost for the difference of the fuel price, that we're paying? Because in reality, what we're paying appears to still be subsidized in some form. So if you're saying that subsidy has been removed, what are you calling whatever it is that makes up the difference for that? So it's right for everyone to have concerns that the price of fuel will go up, because like I said, it's been fairly constant around a certain figure for a while. NNPC hasn't even changed their price, in months. So at the potential price of 1,200, I can't speak to if that would be a final price, but the reality is that that price will most likely go up at some point. Because like I said, where is the plug for the difference coming from? NNPC, to the best of my knowledge, has not been fully transparent about that. I think everybody's trying as much as possible to prove that there's no subsidy, because subsidy has officially been cancelled, but something is happening, that is buffering the price that people are paying. Ideally, when subsidy was removed, the idea was that the cost of fuel would, rise and fall, according to international prices, because we're importing it, we're paying dollars for it, and that affects the cost of fuel. But that has not necessarily been the case. So ever since subsidy removal was removed, I think June 1st, we've only had about 2 or maybe 3 fuel price increases. And with each increase, there has been an outcry. So many have alluded to the fact that the federal government, does not want to burden the people further with fuel prices, which is why that fuel price has not been allowed to naturally flow the way that it should. But let's see anyway. Time will only tell. I'm not sure how long NNPC can sustain this fuel price for.
So, because earlier on, we were speaking with Yinko Sola this morning on Business Express, who was our guest, and we're looking at this issue of if Nigerians can really afford a petrol price to be 1,200, knowing that the attendant distortions it would create in terms of their livelihood, income, and everything. So, is it something that Nigerians should at least be grateful for, that somewhere along the line, and someone is paying for these differentials, and we are not complaining?
So the challenge with that is clearly someone is paying for the differential, but that money could go elsewhere. 1, 2, where is even that money coming from? Is it money that we're borrowing from the future? Is it money that we already have somewhere? Is it money that we're earning currently? There needs to be a lot more transparency around it. Yes, we might be quote unquote enjoying because the fuel price isn't so high, but like you said, the differential is being borne by someone. That's potentially money that could have been put to other uses. So are we the better off for it now, or should the fuel price actually just be left alone to rise to wherever it's going to rise to? The reality is, if the fuel price becomes 1,200 now, it would really be a cause for concern, because that's like doubling it now. It will severely affect transportation costs, it will affect food costs, cost of living, employers, business operational cost as well for businesses that use fuel. So I really don't know what to say.
Zibby, just give me a moment to just throw this one in quickly. Gbubemi, see, because it's petrol and I know it affects us, and that's why I still want to dig in and probably if we can get some more from this question. So, in relation to this aspect, the argument between the independent marketers and the NNPC, some will say they are businessmen. And so the only way they can do this and they can get their margin while they're pushing for this is for personal interest. Right now, they don't want to come in, even though they've got license to get to import fuel into the country. They feel it's not profitable. But NNPC is doing it, and then they are complaining.
Well, it's not necessarily that they feel it's not profitable. They know it's not profitable, because if they have to bring in fuel and provide it, then they most likely have to do it at the terms at which the NNPC is doing it, because there's no way the NNPC will be providing fuel at say 586, and if I as an independent marketer, my cost and everything is, let me just assume 800 naira, I don't think the NNPC will allow that to happen. So rather than even getting to the point where these independent marketers will put themselves in a situation that they may not be able to get themselves out of, they just decide to stay out of it.
All right, let's go on to the messages that we have coming through. Dr. I says the doctors and nurses in the UK have access to better and affordable housing, transportation, infrastructure, and in-job training. Are these included in our salaries in Nigeria? Why the constant justification of what is mediocre? There is a lining crisis of shortage in healthcare, and all I hear is blackmail and subtle threats. No problem. More people will become media personalities and content producers. Well, at least they'll be earning an honest living, don't you think so, Dr. I? Okay, Tajuddin says, Chief of Staff to the President donated a building to the Open University. Is it his money? We can't make them feel like they are doing us a favor. I saw the governor in a video yesterday saying on a road I've done, he didn't do it with his money. Idima Puza says, we Nigerians contribute to the NLC and TUC not doing well. We've never believed in them whenever they call for strike. Because of the pain it'll bring on the people, we never give them the support they need. That's why they are powerless, and that's why we'll continue to be oppressed by the governments. All right, so let's move on to the next headline. IGP to improve on police officers' pension scheme. The Inspector General of Police Kaide Betokun has initiated measures to review and potentially improve the pension regime for retired police personnel.
Okay, so we have a national pension scheme that guides private organizations, and a separate one that guides other organizations like the army, the police. And typically, what happens is that the employee pays a portion of the salary, as a contribution to the pension scheme, and the employer also matches it with another portion. So currently, we have for the private sector, we have 8% from the employee's salary and 10% from the employer. I'm not quite sure what operates within the forces, but I know that they have a separate pension scheme. So typically the pension contributions are based on salary. That's what I'm just trying to highlight. Now, so this discussion on pension scheme for the police officers has its roots from even how much they are paid as salary. And for all that we know, the police officer salary isn't really impressive. So what I'm thinking is that what are the options available to the Police Services Commission, for example? Clearly a salary increase, or improvement is long overdue. Also, would the Police Service Commission want to increase their matching percentage to the employee's salary, or will they just focus on improving or increasing the salaries? So typically that's the thing. And then there's also access to the pensions when the police officers have retired. So there are always usually challenges, because they have to do a lot of verification, which involves a lot of paperwork. So for some reason, a lot of all these things are paper based. You bring your employment letter, you bring your promotion letter, you bring this, bring that, typically, and they always have to go for some sort of verification all of the time. So which impacts on the timing for when they receive their pensions, as against someone who's worked in the private sector, for example. Once you've reached the retirement age, you can approach your pension service provider, who in collaboration with the pension commission would, in under like a month, would define how you'd receive your pension payment. So whether you receive a lump sum and then a guaranteed monthly sum or whatever, that's for retiring, or even if you lose your job, for example, and you apply for a portion of your pensions, there's a defined time within which you can receive it. But for these other independent bodies, because they have their own pension service providers, it's not always the case. So there also needs to be an improvement in the efficiency of those processes as well, to enable these officers to be able to receive their pensions as and when due.
All right, Gbubemi, let's race down and touch a bit on, we've touched on oil. So this headline relates to the Naira. Just help us make meaning of it. We understand that the Naira fell to 1,035 Naira to the US dollar at the official market, and the black market was about 1,235 Naira. What's going on with this up and down seesaw movement we're seeing?
Okay, we'll continue to be subject to the changing price of the dollar to the Naira, because largely, our foreign receipts are based on oil. A lot of what we have now, has already been, what's that word now? We've sort of received upfront payment for a lot of all our oil into the future. So that's one challenge. We haven't come up with a new source of foreign income earning services or products, and we're dependent on that largely. There've also been talks of foreign investment flows from, I think, like, was it Afri-Exim or the AFDB? So all of those things, ideally should impact on the cost or should impact on the exchange rate, but because those things haven't necessarily come to fruition, we haven't seen the impact. And even when they do come to fruition, the question is, for how long would we see the impact really? So I can't speak to the changes, in the future potentially for the dollar, but what I would say is that the circumstances of today are not necessarily different from the circumstances of yesterday. So it's potentially likely that we would still see these increases in the rates of the dollar to the Naira.
So the Naira has been floated, it's all partially floated, just like subsidy on petrol, partially in it.
Yes, so that's why we currently have, should I say two exchange regimes? Yes. We have the official rate and we have the black market rate, and typically more people can access the black market than the official markets, which is what stimulates the price of the black markets.
All right. Let's get a message across. Ajayi Olunduwa comes up from Magodo GRA Sherry, and he says the level of inflation currently ravaging the country and the meager budgetary allocation to education this year's budget does not support the claim that education will be accessible to Nigerians. Even how the students' loan scheme promised by the president will benefit them is yet to be clearly defined. January was the year they said it would take off, so we await that one to see. Shegun's message is here and says, when people in office do not perform their duties, we complain. But when someone showcases his achievement, we ask if it was their money he used. If that's the yardstick, then no politician should say what he achieved in office. And that's how we wrap it up.
All right. Thank you for your messages. Thank you for listening. And special thanks to our analyst this morning, Gbubemi, for joining us. Thank you. That's it for Freshly Pressed. Stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.